Bitcoin has a serious problem, and a lot of the Bitcoin maxi crowd just simply won't admit this to you. They won't tell you about this problem. But if you actually look at this market and you study this problem becomes very, very clear. It's the fact that Bitcoin has diminished returns. Bitcoin won't make the same returns that it did back in 2021 or 2017 and 2018. But the thing is that Bitcoin will continue to go up. It just won't be as significant. That's why I've always said that Bitcoin is not a lucrative investment vehicle for late newcomers to the space. Early investors of Bitcoin, yeah, it was very lucrative for them. But now we look at other projects. And what's crazy about this is we now have mainstream media talking about how XRP is the smartest cryptocurrency to buy with $500 right now. Obviously, this is from USA Today. They have 5.1 million followers. Do I think that this is extremely bullish? Do I think that, I agree with this? Not exactly. I think that there is better buy opportunities out there, especially if you only have $500. But the fact that we're starting to see this type of recognition shows us that the market is shifting. It's changing. But I will say, I don't think that Bitcoin should even be mentioned here. I think Bitcoin, for the most part, is not going to make you rich unless you have a ton of money. And I mean a ton of money to buy whole Bitcoins. It's not going to make you rich. But on top of that, we also did get a big update from Cointelegraph saying Insight, XRP may be gearing up for a short-term rebound. Crypto companies are beginning to return to the United States as top officials signal a shift towards friendlier regulation and other news. So now we have Cointelegraph as well, which, by the way, if you don't know, Cointelegraph has been biased over the years. They've always talked down on a few altcoins, including even XRP. They've been pretty bearish against XRP over the years, and now we're starting to see that tune shift because, again, XRP is now too bullish to ignore. XRP is one of the most bullish altcoins in this market at this current point, and it continues to do very well. The strength behind XRP is very significant, even on the downtrends. But again, when we think about this, a lot of people will continue to focus on what we hear from the Bitcoin maxis, which is that Bitcoin will remain the number one project. The strength of Bitcoin is too, much to handle for other, communities to really kind of look at. Because again, when we think about Bitcoin, obviously it has a massive maxi crowd behind it. It has a huge amount of support because it's the number one crypto project. And a lot of people just think that Bitcoin's going to continue to retain that number one spot, but also the dominance is going to continue to just go up and up and up and retain that 60% to 70% level. There's actually a lot of even XRP maxis that think like this as well, even when it comes to like XRP. But the problem is that the market is going to always shift. There's always going to be different things happening around this market that change the overall outlook. But one thing that I will say here is that Bitcoin will be flipped eventually. Bitcoin, in terms of that number one spot, things will change. And I do think that Bitcoin will lose that number one spot. The question is, what happens after that? Because again, a lot of people have held on to Bitcoin because it's the first cryptocurrency. It's the largest one by market cap. It has, retained that number one spot forever. The dominance is also pretty significant. But when we start to see things change, I question what will happen. Now, on top of that, if we go over here to my post from November of 2024, I said that at some point in the future, projects like XRP and HBAR will be bigger than Bitcoin. Many will read that and laugh or say that it's impossible. Let me ask you this serious question. When this space's value is determined by utility, what utility does Bitcoin actually provide? For the longest time, we have heard the store of value narrative pushed, but what value does just holding something provide? When diminished returns become a reality and utility is the value driver, old age tech starts to become phased out. This is the future for Bitcoin, in my opinion, whether people agree with me or not. These projects that have extremely efficient tech and real world use cases already lined up will be the most valuable projects in this space. And even now with things, happening around regulatory moves in the US, I still think that this should be the focus. We are starting to see the shift to utility, to real world value projects. This is also why Stellar and Hedera and Algorand and these projects continue to be successful behind the scenes with fundamental, exposure. They are expanding rapidly with major partnerships. They are working with some very large names. They're signing deals with some very large names. This continues to be a trend, and it's happening with these projects that for years everyone talked about. Oh, they're not going to, see any significant value tied to them because, we're still early. There's not going to, be a big shift for utility. A utility season's never going to happen. Like, we constantly hear these discussions, and the question here that I always ask is, at what point does the tech actually get utilized? Because again, the tech is the big focus from my point of view, especially for the mid to long term, range. And we're already starting to see the tech being focused on from the government. Why do you think that stablecoins are being tapped in? It's because stablecoins moving over these DLTs is extremely efficient for value movement, for payments to be settled. It unlocks new use cases around tokenization for these markets that, for the whole world that are already tapped in on. Like, these types of asset classes and markets that people are utilizing on a day-to-day basis, they need to be upgraded. They need to become more efficient. And the best way to do that is by bringing them on chain. That's where these utility projects become a big focus. And Bitcoin, well, guess what? Bitcoin can't handle the scale of these types of use cases. Ethereum can't handle the scale of these types of use cases. So we look at the next, projects. We look at XRP. We look at HWAR. We look at Algo. We look at Stellar. These are the projects that are the future face of crypto. But on top of that, we constantly hear these price predictions. This is actually from VanEck's CEO. We have here from Subjective Views. If Bitcoin were to reach half the value of physical gold, it would be approximately $537,225 per coin. Now ask yourself where XRP's price would be. And here we have Bitcoin, it's digital gold. At some point, it will be half the value of physical gold. Check this out.
And consumers. I don't want to leave this interview without asking you about Bitcoin and crypto, because your firm has been front and center on this issue. And during the darkest, coldest days of the crypto winter, Matt Siegel was messaging me about his belief, his faith. And, that was at $15,000. Now we're at $115,000. What gave you that faith to lead on crypto?
I mean, it's just a feeling that for Bitcoin, it's digital gold, and I just say, listen, at some point it'll be half the value of physical gold, and that's about $400,000. And I think we're just maturing our way there. I think over the last month, what's been amazing is the stablecoin news. And so I call the Genius Act the third most important piece of bank regulation in U.S. history, because you now can be a tech company and compete in the payments area. Throughout U.S. history, you needed to be a bank. Now you can be a tech company. And that'll take a year. It'll take 4+ quarters. But the revolution that's going to happen on Wall Street is incredible.
So yeah, when we are hearing these types of discussions, number one, the marketing crowd behind Bitcoin. It's always from these very large financial institutional players or asset management companies. We constantly hear the marketing around Bitcoin heating up more and more and more. And this is where I look at the distraction mechanism becoming a reality. They want us distracted on Bitcoin. They want us focused on Bitcoin. It's the most valuable asset in the space currently, but it's also the most inefficient network in this space currently as well. This is where I think that there is a very large issue that a lot of people just won't admit that there is one. There's a very large issue tied to this space, which is the big players are distracting us away from the largest revolution. We've talked about this with Franklin Templeton because they told us this. Jenny Johnson, the CEO of Franklin Templeton, even said that Bitcoin is like the largest distraction away from the largest revolution happening. And it's because when we think about what's going on in this space, XRP, for the most part, if we go back to July 31st, we know because Dom Kwok posted this, XRP accounted for a higher percentage of Coinbase's trading revenue than Ethereum or even Solana. Now, on top of that, we also know from CME Group, they recently talked about how Ethereum, Solana, and XRP are surging, and our chief economist has the story. The Genius Act is boosting investor confidence and shifting the crypto landscape. We're proud to offer futures on these and other leading assets. Now, in the full, response to this is their full breakdown of this. They talked about, a lot of things, obviously, but the main thing that I'm actually looking at here is, just a few things that they are mentioning with XRP. And if we scroll down, we have for Ethereum and Solana, there is no limit to coin supply. While for XRP, 100 billion tokens were pre-mined, of which 38 billion are still held in escrow, with up to 12 billion available for release each year. This gives the Ethereum, Solana, and XRP ledger blockchains much lower trading costs than the Bitcoin blockchain. And they can process transactions much more quickly at around 1 to 5 minutes for Ethereum, approximately 5 seconds for Solana, and 4 seconds for the XRP ledger. That makes processing transactions 400 to 500 times faster than for Bitcoin, and perhaps 30 to 40 times faster than with Ethereum. The high and variable cost of transacting on the Bitcoin blockchain might explain why Bitcoin prices are not rising as fast as they once were. It now takes over 100 trillion calculations to create a new Bitcoin as a result of Bitcoin's energy-intensive proof-of-work coin creation and trade validation system. And perhaps because of the slow pace of trade validation, only 7 transactions per second, and a 10 to 60 minute wait for confirmation, the number of transactions per day hasn't risen much since 2016. Basically, the Bitcoin blockchain is operating at capacity. In the early days of Bitcoin, when the number of transactions per day was rising exponentially, Bitcoin prices rose exponentially as well. Since early 2017, the number of trades per day has been stagnant, indicating that Bitcoin's user base may have stopped growing as well. But again, Bitcoin maxis won't tell you this. They will not tell you the truth. And if we even scroll down, we have finally the cost of transacting on the Bitcoin blockchain, as measured by miners' revenue per transaction, has been highly variable. As of mid-July, one must pay roughly $120 to the miners in order to have a transaction validated when transacting on the Bitcoin blockchain itself. In the past, spikes in transaction costs have often coincided with subsequent bear markets in Bitcoin prices, some of which have taken prices down by between 70 to 93%. Miners' revenue per transaction, however, is not currently close to record highs, but it is still something to watch. Even for those in Ethereum, Solana, and XRP, given their positive correlation to Bitcoin, if Bitcoin corrects, it could take the other crypto assets down with it. In the event of a Bitcoin bear market, XRP might be an outperformer given that it has the weakest correlations among the crypto group. So they're telling us that XRP is actually extremely strong right now and more efficient compared to even Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. And we also have down here that what is clear is that as the crypto world matures and formal legal frameworks are beginning to form governing the crypto space, there is a potential for diversification away from Bitcoin and towards crypto assets like Ethereum, Solana, and XRP that have more explicit use cases than Bitcoin. This is coming from CME Group. They are literally telling us the actual truth here. They're talking about how Bitcoin no longer is the true investment, focus from our point of view. Like, we should not be looking at Bitcoin. They're telling us that dominance and value will be usurped. They're telling us that, XRP has quickly and at this point outpaced both Ethereum and Solana, and the strength of XRP is also more significant, which is why they're saying that even if Bitcoin does fall, XRP might stay pretty stable or even rise in value. Now, that is, of course, during a bear market, but the fact that this is coming from CME Group should tell us a lot of things. Number one, they realize that XRP has been going crazy for over a year now. It's outpaced Bitcoin and Ethereum this cycle, and even Solana, and even like most of the top 100. This is also telling us that we should be focused on other altcoins outside of Bitcoin. Why do we constantly see all of this Bitcoin hype? Why are we talking about Bitcoin on mainstream media when it shouldn't be the focus? It's because they want us distracted. I mean, Bitcoin's overall value growth is going to continue to diminish more and more. The diminished returns is a real thing, but they won't tell us the truth on this. They won't tell us, the actual facts behind the Bitcoin network, which is the fact that it's extremely inefficient to transact on. And this is why I think that Jenny Johnson from, Franklin Templeton was 100% on point when she said that Bitcoin is the biggest distraction. We should not be distracted by Bitcoin. We should be focused on the new generation of crypto tech, which is, in my opinion, XRP, HBAR, Algo, Stellar, etc. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys definitely need to like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, this has been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.